Hi, this is Chris, and we are taking a look at questions 28, 29, and 30 to finish up the multiple choice in section 4 of SAT Practice Test 1. So let's take a look at question 28. It says if the system of inequalities y is greater than or equal to 2x plus 1 and y is greater than 1/2 x minus 1 is graphed in the xy plane above, which quadrant contains no solutions to the system? So we have two skills required here. First, we have to be able to graph an inequality for each of these equations. And then secondly, we have to understand what it means when they say no solutions to that system. So let's start by graphing each of these inequalities. So first we'll look at y is greater than or equal to 2x plus 1. And the easiest way to do this is to start with your y-intercept, which is positive 1, because this is in the form mx plus b, slope-intercept form. So you can start with that intercept. And then the slope is positive 2, which means you would go up 2 and over 1. And that gives you 2 points. And from those 2 points, you can draw a line. Now, because it's an inequality, it means that our solution set will involve shading in either above or below that line. And because it's greater than or equal to for the inequality, that means that you'll be shading in above that line. So this would be this whole area up in here. That would be part of the solution set for that first inequality. Now the second one says y is greater than 1/2 x minus 1. So we're going to do something similar. It's still in slope-intercept form. So we can mark our intercept at -1. And then here we have a slope of 1/2, which means we're going up 1 and over 2. So that would be up 1 over 2 and take us here. And then we can draw this line because it's greater than instead of greater than or equal to, because it doesn't have that line underneath. That means our line will actually appear as a dashed line, which indicates that any points on the line itself are not included in this solution set because it's not greater than or equal to, it's only greater than. But we would shade in similarly above that line, and just to try to color code it a little bit, I'll put this in red, and so we can see this would be everything above that second line that we drew, that dashed line. So that would be our solution set. Now, for the system, for something to be a solution to the system, it means that it's going to be that area where these two inequalities overlap. So that would be here in this region. So we can see that we have both the red and the blue shading overlap in this region here, which covers a little bit of quadrant 1. We can see this little bit of area here in quadrant 1, a lot of quadrant 2, and a little bit of quadrant 3 as well. So quadrant 4 is the only quadrant that has no solutions to the system. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have a solution to one of the inequalities, because it does. Quadrant 4 has a little bit of this red shaded area there, which is part of the solution set for that second inequality, but it's not going to be a solution to the system, because the system is only this area in here where you have the overlap between the two inequalities. So our correct answer on number 28 is going to be answer choice C, quadrant 4, contains no solutions to the system of inequalities that we see there. Now let's take a look at question 29. And this question requires some understanding definitionally. So if you know this concept, there's not a lot of actual math that you have to do here. It's just understanding the concept. And here, whenever you have a function, so it could be written as p of x or f of x or g of x, we most commonly see f of x. But anything in this form indicates that you have a function, and when you plug in a value for that function and get a particular result, so in this case, we don't know what the function itself is, but we do know that if we were to plug in a 3 into that function and do all the calculations, that the answer comes out to be -2. They tell us that right here in the question. And they want to know which of the following is true about this function. So here's what we want to understand is that this value that you see here is going to be indicative of your remainder when you're plugging in this value that you see here inside of your function in place of x. And another way of phrasing that is you're going to plug in 3 for x, and you're going to get a remainder of -2. And this can also be phrased as divide by that corresponding factor, which means divide by that factor of x minus 3. So if that's terminology or phrasing that we haven't seen before, then unfortunately there's not a lot we can do to try to navigate this question. But as long as we do understand that that's what that phrasing means, when they say the remainder when p of x is divided by x, the remainder when p of x is divided by x minus 3 is -2, all that they're saying is that if you were to plug in a 3 for x, you would get -2 as your remainder. And that's what this expression here shows, and it can just be worded in some unique ways that make it more challenging if we haven't been exposed to that language before. But once we understand conceptually that those are equivalent, plugging in a 3 in place of x or dividing by x minus 3 as a factor, that is going to make this question one that we can answer hopefully correctly without spending a lot of time. So we can spend time in advance by learning this concept, but then on the question itself, there's not a lot of actual calculation involved here on 29. Now let's take a look at 30. And this question has a graph. They tell us the equation for this line, y equals x squared minus 2x minus 15, or for this function. And so here we see that it's a parabola, we see that it's a quadratic function, and they say which of the following is an equivalent form of the equation of the graph shown in the xy plane above, from which the coordinates of vertex A can be identified as constants in the equation. So a lot of times on this question, what I see students do initially is they try to multiply these out to see which one will equal this same thing. And that's not a bad idea, and we can try that. And if you were to FOIL out these first couple, you would get here x squared minus 2x minus 15, and this would be x squared plus 2x minus 15. And this, when you distribute that x, you'd have x squared minus 2x minus 15. And here, if you FOILed that and then subtracted the 16, you'd have x squared minus 2x minus 15. So if you simplify all of those, or expand those out, and try to get an expression that looks similar to the function given, then you can see that we can eliminate answer choice B, which is helpful. Anytime you can eliminate something, it points you in the right direction and gets you closer to that correct answer. But A, C, and D all give us the same equation that we had above, y equals x squared minus 2x minus 15. So that by itself isn't enough to answer this question. There's a very important keyword in this question, which is vertex. And this I want us to make one of those just automatic responses, like a Pavlov's dog type response. Whenever you see vertex on SAT, it's important to think vertex form. And vertex form is written as y equals, so the general form, vertex form is going to be a times x minus h, quantity squared, plus k. And the reason we call that vertex form is that these two values here for these constants h and k will tell you the coordinates of your vertex. So your vertex is hk. which means that although this might sound complicated when they say from which the coordinates of vertex A can be identified as constants in the equation, that is a very fancy way in here of just saying, hey, which of these answer choices is in vertex form? And if we know vertex form, hopefully we can look and see that this general form matches what we see here in answer choice D in the way that that's written out, in the way that's depicted. And so again, on questions 29 and 30, so these are two of the hardest questions in this section, right? It's very late in the multiple choice and the math goes easy to hard. So on these two questions, these are essentially high-level difficulty questions that test high-level conceptual understanding or knowledge base, but the actual math calculations required for these are very minimal. So on 29, if you know that definition that we talked about there, you can get answer choice D very quickly. And on question 30, if you know vertex form, which we see written out here, we can get to answer choice D very quickly there as well, saving us a ton of time heading into